I'm Emilie Lunt, and I believe with my whole heart and soul that our homes are places where we can seek and love the truth, celebrate beauty, and learn good things every single day. That's why I'm educating my kids at home, and I know you can do it too. Welcome to Heart and Soul Homeschool. Well, I am so excited that Leslie Nunnery from Teach Them Diligently is joining me today. Leslie, welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
So before we hit recording, I was fact checking something with you. So I lived in Rogers, Arkansas 10 years ago. I moved there in 2013. And I was telling you that I remembered way before I had kids or before I was even married that I saw a sign for a Teach Them Diligently event on our little convention center there in town. And I remember going back to my apartment and looking it up and thinking, oh, that's so interesting that homeschoolers have conventions. I had no idea, but it was kind of a neat full circle moment for me 10 years later in May when I got to go with my husband to our very first Teach Them Diligently conference in Branson. And so it's just interesting how that little seed from seeing your sign was planted so long ago. And then now I'm a homeschool mom. Attending your convention is really neat when I realized that.
I love that. It's such a small world too. We hear stories all the time about how people had seen us or a friend had been to one of our events or whatever, and God just brings people back into kind of our community so often, and we love that. But we love Rogers, Arkansas was one of our favorite places that we held events, and we did probably 6, 7 years worth of events there. So just a great place.
So, Leslie, this was your first event in Branson this year, and we were just talking about how wonderful it was. You guys are going back there next year, right? So, Pigeon Forge and Branson in 2025.
Yes, we actually will be back in Pigeon Forge. We'll be back in Branson, and we're getting ready to announce a couple of more. So the Lord is opening doors for us to teach them diligently to more areas of the country, which we're so thankful for because it really is missional for us to reach as many families
Mhm.
as we can to encourage them in what they're doing within their homes.
Yeah, and I'm excited about that, Leslie, because I've been to other homeschool conventions and had heard about Teach Them Diligently, like I said. But every homeschool convention kind of has its own personality, if you will. And it was really, really incredible. My husband, Jared, unprompted commented on this while we were in Branson this year. He said the crowd here is just different, and it truly is. It is. You can tell that people's hearts are in the right place, and not that they're not at other homeschool conventions, but it is so gospel centered, and so people are there just longing to learn how to disciple their kids, and I think that shows. And so it really is a unique event, and it's not by accident, is it?
No, no. And I'm so grateful that you said that because it really is our heart, our passion to help families focus on what God has called them to do, which is parent their children well, bring them to Jesus, disciple them, shepherd their hearts, and then see homeschooling as the amazing tool for that it is. One of the things we talk about heart schooling is what we call it. But when you line things up the way that God has, as far as what your mission really is, and then using homeschooling to accomplish that well within your home, it just brings so much peace and so much confidence, and it removes so much friction. Whereas if you're looking at homeschooling as the be all end all, like your primary calling, it ushers in a lot of issues. So yes, we try to lift up Jesus. We try to make sure that our conferences are thick with the gospel. We want to help families recognize that their primary goal is to draw closer to Him and then to bring their children to Him as well, because that is where we're really fighting the battles that is going to give them the foundation for success in every area of their life as they grow.
Yeah, so important. And I actually listened to one of your podcasts. I think it was earlier this year, where you were talking about the story of Teach Them Diligently, and I'll link back to that episode in our show notes here if people want to catch the full story. But could you kind of just give us the Cliff's Note version of how Teach Them Diligently started?
Oh, I would love to. Teach them diligently started. It's very much wrapped into my own story of homeschooling, because David and I were borderline never homeschoolers. That was not on our radar. We didn't want any part of it. But then God started really impressing on our hearts when my oldest son was in third grade that our time with our children was short, and we were responsible for how we utilized that time and what we did with the opportunities that God gave us. And so we purposed then and there that we would homeschool because it gave us so many opportunities to reach the hearts of our children and to prepare them well to walk through whatever doors God opened for them in the days ahead. So our initial reason for homeschooling was discipleship. Well, as we homeschooled the first year, I brought home basically the box of curriculum that lined up with what they were using in the Christian school they had been in. And at the end of that first year, we were able to go to our first ever homeschool convention. Um, and it was not long after that that there was a situation that arose with some players that were at that convention. And it grieved me the way that the world was seeing Christians behave kind of at one another. It was not a very polite discourse that was going on kind of publicly. And so it was not long after that that God had called my husband David to leave his job in sports marketing to go full time with the mission board that he had been running as a volunteer. This mission board is all about using business to really impact the world with the gospel. So it's a business as missions organization. We were tasked with starting something that supported that mission, made it self-sustaining. And so we felt like God wanted us to to host an event that celebrated discipleship in homeschooling and really, really focused parents back on what their call actually was, which was rather ironic because we got called to do that at the end of our first year of homeschooling, where we knew none of the players, none of the curriculum. I mean, we really were so green, but we knew that God had called us to really go for the hearts of our kids, and we wanted to encourage others to do so. And so it was a one-time thing that God blessed magnificently. And he brought in about 1,500 families from 38 states and 4 countries outside of the U.S. to that first event, just really underscoring the fact that we could not have done that. We are not smart enough, savvy enough, anything enough to do what God did there. And so at the end of that event, we just talked to some advisors and some friends, and all of us agreed that God was in this. And what he has done since then, allowing us to produce about 45 events, reaching thousands and thousands and thousands of families with gospel truths and discipleship focus and strengthening families all along the way. We just truly stand in awe, and we're so grateful for the doors that God has opened.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. And a couple of things stood out to me. Number one, you said that David had a career in marketing. And I think you had a career also before homeschooling, right? That lent itself well to what you're doing now.
Yes, actually, I had been a PR and marketing director for a newspaper and TV station. David was in sports marketing. And so the Lord had already put in our hands a lot of the skill sets that we would need to produce an event. We just didn't know much about the players in the kind of niche that we were producing it in.
Yeah.
But God took care of that. And, it's always amazing to me how God actually calls us generally with what he's put in our hand, just like Moses was called to use his shepherd staff. And, you see that over and over again. God equips us, and then he calls us in the arenas that he's already given us what we need to do to follow him.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to bring that up because, we have found, so we've only been homeschooling for 3 years, but my husband and I are so impressed with the homeschool community. We got married and had kids when we were a little bit older, and so we both had careers that we love. My husband still has a career, thankfully, while I get to be the homeschool mom and the stay-at-home mom. But we find that homeschooling parents are some of just the smartest, most competent, creative people, and so I think that a lot of times maybe people who aren't familiar with our community might think that we're just a bunch of stay-at-home moms, but these are people who have so many gifts and talents and who are constantly looking to fill gaps and fill needs within the community and create resources. And I just think it's amazing. And your story is really encouraging, hopefully, maybe to some parents who are out there seeing a need, who are like, man, God, you've given me all these skills. I'm not sure how to use them. And what you said, he equips us and then will call us. And so just patience, maybe waiting to find out what the next step is. But those talents and gifts don't have to just lay latent, do they?
Oh, no, not at all. And, even beyond what you may already have in your hand, as you are kind of learning alongside of your children, I speak all the time about how a homeschool mom is probably the most interesting person on the block because she's studying literature and science and history and all of these really cool things. And God uses those things to open up conversations with people, whether it be at family gatherings or in the grocery store or at church or whatever. But even in that little arena, as you are growing and as you are learning new things, both spiritually and practically, God continues to open doors and use you in those ways, which is so fulfilling. And you're able to model following Christ and serving for your kids, which is an incredible opportunity to again just pass on your faith in a very authentic, natural way that's going to give them a solid foundation for their own.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's really, really great insight. And it actually is a really good transition into sort of the official topic that I wanted to talk to you about today. So, you have older kids, right? Tell us just a little bit about the landscape of your family right now, if you're willing.
Oh, absolutely. So my kids, I have a 24-year-old son, a 22-year-old son, a 21-year-old daughter, and a 17-year-old daughter. My two middle children got married last year. So my son got married in July, my daughter in December. And so I've graduated three. They finished and are kind of launching out on their own. My youngest is now a rising senior in high school. So we have been able to see just God's hand taking us through all the different stages of homeschooling and now into this new stage of having adult kids and watching them spread their wings and serve Him on their own. It's an amazing time. I love it.
Yeah, I can imagine, I'm a long way away from that. It feels very far away. But I do have several friends, several friends who are kind of in that stage of life or getting ready to enter it where, they pour their hearts and souls into homeschooling their kids. So much time and effort goes into that. And the kids are either leaving the nest or getting ready to, and they're just feeling very unprepared for the next season of life. And it seems like it catches a lot of families, even though we know it's going to happen, it catches families, and I think moms in particular, kind of off guard. Why do you think that is, Leslie, that something that we know is going to happen, we feel so unprepared for when it actually happens to us?
Well, part of the thing, my mom used to tell me all the time, and I credited her for this wisdom every time I talk about it, because I thought I didn't take it as seriously as I wish I should have. But she told me when I was a very young mom that you don't borrow from tomorrow, that God will give you the grace for the season that you're entering when the time comes. And I saw that really in Technicolor all the way through, but it became very, very clear, like crystal clear. The beginning of my oldest son's senior year of high school, I thought I was going to die. This is going to be the death of me. I can't let him go. And mom's voice was echoing in my ear. You've got to just trust God God will give you the grace when it's time. And so I determined to enjoy the rest of that part of that season with my son. And then by the time it came for him to step into that next season, I was ready and he was ready, and it was amazing. And so even as your kids are growing older and they're launching out, I had two weddings this year, kind of going early, kind of looking ahead. I was, how am I going to let them go? And yet at the event and now after, it's just a joyous time. So if you walk faithfully day in and day out, you're building those relationships with your kids. You're being faithful in the opportunities that you have. That you're building, kind of traditions and doing all of these things, you're going to find that when they do launch out, you're able to just grow those traditions and those relationships even into a much more mature and beautiful manifestation of it. My two married kids are in and out of my house almost every day still. And it's incredible the way that God just continues to make those relationships so impactful. And it's exciting to think about what He's got in store for this next season. So I would encourage those who are not quite there yet, not to fear it and let God, or let that fear remove you the joy that you could have in the season that you're in, because you're borrowing trouble, because you're so dreading the transition. Because when that transition comes, you're going to find all the beauty in that next season as well.
Yeah, I think that's really sweet advice. Moms know best, right? We should always listen to our moms.
That's right. That's right. Or you're going to find yourself speaking on a podcast saying she was right.
That's funny. So as I was listening to you talk, I have the benefit also of having a mom and grandmas who have just poured wisdom into me. And I'm so thankful for that. For women who may not have the perspective of an older woman in their life, or whose kids are already older and they're thinking, oh my goodness, I haven't done what Leslie just said. I haven't taken joy in the stage we're at now. I haven't built those traditions. What would you say to that woman to encourage her, like, start now? Is it ever too late?
It's never too late. Even if they've flown, build those relationships no matter what the reality is. You still are connected to that child. You still are their mom or their dad. And God is so gracious and so good. So find what it takes to bridge the gap if there is one. Putty up those wedges if there are breaches or breaks in your relationship. Um, Never hesitate to acknowledge where you have faltered, where you have failed, where the things that you need to say you're sorry for. Do what it takes to make sure that those relationships are salvaged, because you have a whole rest of your lifetime to enjoy fellowship with that sweet child, and you'll never ever regret mending those fences and building that relationship no matter where you are.
Yeah, thanks you for that encouragement, because that's something, even though I have young kids at home, those are all things that we can be working on, whether we're coming to the end, or those are great things to sort of integrate into what we do with our kids at home, in addition to sort of those sweet memory building things too.
Oh, absolutely. And I find that kids are incredibly gracious. None of us are perfect moms. Um, we aren't perfect. There aren't perfect dads. We aren't perfect parents, but um, our children see the sum total of the work that we're doing. And as I look back now, and we gather around the table like we're going to do here in just a little bit for my mom's birthday party tonight, the kids will sit around. They are going to share crazy stories, because they always do things that they know I didn't know about, so they like to throw them out just to laugh and make
Yeah, and
fun. But
always when there's company, right?
always, and it's hilarious. Actually, it's amazing they live through it. But never once do they sit around and say, "Mom, you were so grumpy that one day that," or whatever. They're not pointing out the things that us parents tend to focus on so much. I failed here, I snapped here, I did this, I did that. The kids, when they're grown, they're not looking back and pointing at that. They're looking back and they're saying, I have, one of my kids actually just told me the other day, he came in and he said, I know you guys learned about all this stuff that meant so much to us that you didn't really care about. Thank you so much for caring enough to get in there and learn about, whatever it was, Pokemon, whatever it was at the time. Mario Kart, he was specifically what he was talking about. But they remember the way that you engage with them. They remember the big picture. They remember the fact that you were there for them. They remember the conversations. They don't remember when you were highly stressed in a dark season of your life and you were really, really brittle. They get past that really quickly. And so we can't let Satan hamstring us by constantly keeping us stuck in our failures, when there's a lot of grace to be had, and we can get past those and build really strong relationships with our kids.
Yeah, that's such a good reminder. And honestly, Leslie, that's something that I pray about for my kids, honestly. That God will guard their hearts from my failures, and, that He will work in them in spite of me, because some days are rough, right? We're not always what we want to be. So that's a good, comforting reminder that you just gave me personally. And I think it'll be encouraging to a lot of other moms. So as we prepare for these life transitions, do you and David take time, set aside time as a couple to kind of game these things out? Like, I know there's the lifetime of preparing, and then there are just some practical things that our lives change, that things that might have occupied significant portions of our time are no longer happening as kids leave the home. And that will make life as a couple look different. Have you guys taken time to game that out, or let it sort of happen organically? What advice would you have for couples?
Well, funnily, we talk all the time. We seem busier than we did when the kids were all at our house,
Yeah.
largely because we drop everything when they come over now. So rather than
Mhm.
it being kind of a normal rhythm of life, if one of them shows up, we're stopping. We're enjoying our time with them. So it's different than I would have imagined in that way. But yeah, we want to be as intentional during this season as we were in all the other seasons. And we also recognize, and we've always been very, very forward thinking about investing in our own relationship. And that's something that I would tell you and all of those listening in, make sure that you never neglect your marriage. That's your number one relationship, because as your kids start flying and launching out, it's the two of you that will be left there. And I was just praying this morning as we were laying in bed before we got up, kind of groggy still. I am so grateful that 27 years into our relationship, I actually like him more than I did when we first met. We have so much fun together. We love to talk, we love to play, we have the best time. And that is something that you just have to work at during those seasons when everything seems to be working against you on that, where it's
Mhm.
hard to find time, when there's stressful things, a lot of changes. Keep focusing on that relationship, because that's going to be the foundation for all these other relationships. Because if you guys are stable, your kids are going to feel a lot more stable and secure. They're going to be a lot more likely to come back because the atmosphere in your home is going to be more peaceful and fun. So I can't overstate the importance of investing in your relationship with your spouse through every season, because that's going to be so important in your relationship with your kids as they grow.
Yeah, and we see that a lot, just that we have to, I think sometimes as homeschoolers, we have to be even more intentional about that, because our family dynamic is such that, I'm at home with the kids doing school and all of the other things that kids do during the day. And my husband works from home. So we're together all the time, but we're not together all the time. And we have to be really careful just to kind of guard our relationship, and that we need to set boundaries with our kids. It's like, this is time when mom and dad are going to talk for 10 minutes while mom fixes dinner, or just sort of those little things that, while we feel like we're together, to be intentional to really engage in meaningful time together still.
Yeah, absolutely. We took retreats the entire time my kids were growing up. So David and I would rent a cabin or whatever and go away for a couple of days on a regular basis, because um, that it just, with four kids and all the spares that are around and all the things going on, it is hard to have meaningful conversation. So we would normally go away around the first of the school year and around the first of the year to just kind of plan and pray about the upcoming season that we were entering. And that made a huge difference.
Yeah.
So if you're able to find a way to do that, I can't recommend that highly enough.
Yeah, and may I say that we just used the conference in Branson to kind of do that for us. And so, a Teach Them Diligently conference could be a really great, and I say that kind of jokingly, but seriously also, because it was really great for us to connect over our purpose. That's what we're doing right now in life. And so sometimes I think the burden, not the burden, the responsibility sometime of making a lot of the decisions in homeschooling sometimes can fall on mom. And so it was really, really good for us, for him to kind of get a peek into, like, these are the people that I'm listening to. These are the curriculums that I'm looking at. These are all of the things available to us, and just kind of bring us in as a couple on what we're focused on. And so what you guys are doing is also providing a really great opportunity for couples to connect at a meaningful event also.
Yeah, and we love it when couples come together. I think it's such a great way to approach the event.
Yeah. So, kind of as we wrap up here, there are things that we can do as women. I think probably, aside from, like we said, just those daily, day in, day out relational things that we do with our kids to kind of prepare for a time when it's just us. So we work on our marriage, but we should also probably be preparing our own selves. And I think sometimes, as I was thinking about talking to you about this, I was thinking about all the things that our culture says about how women deserve me time. You be you, focus on you. And they're all kind of selfishly oriented, if you will. Right. And my heart does not want to go down that path, Leslie, at all. And so sometimes I feel like, in my desire to not lean into what the world is telling me, that sometimes I neglect to do the things that could be healthy. As far as developing a hobby on my own or developing friendships outside the homeschooling world. Do you see that happen to women, and what would you advise?
Oh, it's a huge problem. Not just, I think that's a huge problem for moms in general, and
Mm-hmm.
I think it's on steroids with homeschool moms because we're with our kids 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it is a really big deal. We have a membership community called Teach Them Diligently 365 that is all about really giving moms an outlet, a community, but also giving her constant food, constant
Mm-hmm.
reminders, constant content that will feed her soul where she is. There, within that community, I've done a lot of teaching on taking care of mom. In fact, the video for this month is about taking care of mom. Because if you are not taking care of yourself, and that is body, soul, spirit, emotions, everything, you are not really giving your family the best that you have to offer. God created you um, with limits, and you've got to recognize that. You've got to take the time to rest. You've got to take the time to actually care for yourself, or you're just going to be you're going to be creating an atmosphere in your home that is not pleasant for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
There's the joke, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. And it's true. If you're not well, if you're not leading by example, then no one else is going to follow that. So one of the things that is really God impressed on me when my kids were very little was the way that I take care of my body, the way that take care of my spirit and everything else. That's what I am showing my kids is good and normal and right. And so by taking the time to actually get some exercise, absolutely starting my day in God's word every day, and all of these other things that are so important with just taking care of myself, that is really a heritage that I'm passing on to my kids. And so for me, and I think for a lot of homeschool moms, when you recognize, oh, wait, this is what I'm modeling, that kind of takes the pressure off of this is a selfish endeavor. And it actually helps you to see this is as much for my kids as anything else that I'm doing. Because not only am I a better mom because I am taking care of myself, but I'm also setting an example of how they should live. And I don't want them to be worn out and brittle and fragile as they get older either. So it's there's a lot of benefits to really focusing in on that, and I can't encourage you strongly enough to do so.
Yeah, that's such a good perspective. And I think that kind of reframes things in my mind that I'm modeling what I hope my daughter will live her life like. And it's true. They are watching us so closely. And I think just having the perspective that it's a marathon, sometimes I really struggle with that, that it is a marathon, that this is something that I'm going to be doing for the next 12 years of my life. And so it needs to be a model that's sustainable and healthy and good, not just for this week or this month or this year even, but for the long haul of what's gonna serve us all well for that. So thank you for your perspective.
Absolutely. Well, and it's more holistic than a lot of the messaging that they're getting too. And yeah, even our little children are getting messaging about what bodies should look like, and
Mhm.
skinny, and what you should eat and what you should not eat and all of these things. And as a mom, you have the power to really derail that and help them understand that God gave you a body to serve Him, and you want to be fit for service, and you want to be ready to do whatever He calls you to do. But God made us all looking different. We are different shapes, different sizes, and that's okay because we're made in His image. And so, by the way that you are taking care of yourself and controlling that conversation, you're actually investing in your daughter, particularly your daughter, although it's impacting
Mhm.
guys a lot now too, but especially your daughter's state of mind, her framing of what health is, and everything else. It's a great opportunity to pass on a much better foundation than most of the kids in this world have.
Yeah, it's an amazing opportunity. And I think that's encouraging to me just to think about it in the way that you just described. So, as we wrap up here, you've said so many good things. I know I'm going to be thinking about it for days to come, and I know our listeners will too. So, as people look at Leslie and remember, Leslie, your daughters and your granddaughters, hopefully someday, I'm sure you're wishing for grandkids. Um, what do you hope that they will look at and remember from this stage in your life, that Leslie walked through this big life transition and handled it beautifully, what do you hope that they would take away from the way that you're living this time in life?
That's an amazing question. Actually, that's a question that just made me tear up. I want to be known as someone who served God in every season. I have new opportunities now. God is opening new doors, and I want to faithfully serve in that way. I have always been one that I don't care so much if anyone knows my name. I just want the impact of what God is doing through the work that He's given us to do and the opportunities that He's given us. I want Him to impact families. And so if I could hope for anything, it would be that people look back and they're like, families were strengthened, churches, communities were strengthened because of the work that Leslie and David did in all these different seasons. But it's looked different. The way that God's allowed us to serve Him has been very different when we started and our kids were very young as to now when they're grown. But the heart is the same. I want families to be strengthened and vision of what God has called you to do to be strengthened. And if I could leave a legacy, it would be of really just God using us to strengthen families and strengthen churches through the work that we do.
Yeah, and I think that is amazing what you just said. And as I think about you and sort of some of the other women who I would consider to be leaders in the homeschool community, it's amazing to me just to kind of watch all of you walk through a few steps ahead of me. And I'm so thankful that God has given us women who are a few steps ahead, because we get to see that trajectory and it helps us cast a vision for ourselves. And, I think God will be faithful to raise up, people to come behind you all to be that vision for the next generation also. But it just couldn't be more encouraging to hear that in every season, even if it looks, sometimes you best minister because you're right in the middle of something. And then sometimes, you need that wisdom and equipping. And it's just so encouraging to hear you say that no matter what season, God has a plan and a specific purpose for you. And so I think sometimes when we're in the middle of it, it can seem like, oh man, these hard days are gonna go on forever. Am I ever gonna stop making peanut butter sandwiches? And, and kind of, like you said, just enjoying the time, having that vision for every season is precious and the Lord will use us. So.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah, thank you for being here. This has been so fun, and I love your perspective and love your ministry at large. We're going to link back to all things Teach Them Diligently. We'll link your social media, the website, information for next year's conferences so people can start planning and looking for those exciting announcements. I'm anxious to hear those other 2 locations. Hawaii.
We would love it. We would love it, but the Lord hasn't quite opened that door yet. So,
well, we'll link back to all of that so that our listeners can follow you. And thank you, Leslie, for being here. And for everyone else, I hope you'll join me next week for the next episode of Heart and Soul Homeschool.
Heart and Soul Homeschool is a podcast presentation of the Herzog Foundation. The views and opinions expressed on the show are those of the host and guests and not necessarily the views of the Herzog Foundation. Be sure to like and subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode of Heart and Soul Homeschool.